a week ago, I was out here sweating, changing out the coil springs on this car. And now, as you can see, I'm out here in a flannel, a beanie, and it's 50 degrees in the shop. And the weather here in Oklahoma has flipped just like that, from being really nice 85, 90 degree weather to here's some 40s, and it's going to potentially get down to freezing over the next couple days. All right, here we go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. And we're about to get to work on the car. And the weather, so I'm not too worried about getting out and enjoying driving the car right now, because it's rainy, it's cold, it's like 40 degrees. And so instead, we're just going to do more work on the car that I wasn't necessarily planning to do right away. We're not going to do the wiring, because that's what needs to be done. Instead, we're going to play with a table full of goodies over there. We got some old heads over there in those dusty bags. We'll take a look at those a little bit later. We got a Holley 4-barrel carburetor sitting over there. We got a couple different sets of rockers sitting over there that we'll end up putting on those heads so that we can get rid of the lame duck heads that are on this motor right now and make it a little bit more hot rod. It won't be a race car, but it should be a little bit more hot rod, and hopefully once we do get back out and drive this car, we'll be able to make a little bit of tire smoke with it.
All right, so today's plan is pretty simple. Tear it all apart. First thing we got to do before we can do anything with the new parts is get the old parts off, which isn't going to be overly exciting, or at least shouldn't be overly exciting. It should just come apart. At least that's hopeful thinking. Some of the spots that on a job like this you might run into an issue with is some of the header bolts, which I was kind of looking at those, and hopefully we don't have too much problem there. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Anytime you're going to do this, if you're going to pull the heads, I would recommend rolling the motor over to top dead center as a starting point so that you know where your cam is and where your valves and everything should be when you go putting the new parts back on. That'll at least give you a decent starting point. You are going to have to rotate everything as you redo all the valve lash and everything like that, but knowing where you're starting from is always helpful. So what I'm going to do to get there is I'll end up pulling the air cleaner and the valve covers and everything off, and so I can see my rockers right here. We'll get the motor turned over to top dead center, and then we'll start ripping the guts out of this.
As you can see, and I pulled all the plugs. Show you those in a second. Kind of flashed them for you while I was pulling them out. But what I'm doing right now is I'm bringing the motor over to top dead center so I know where my starting point is when I go to put stuff back together. What you want to look for is for the exhaust stroke, followed by the intake stroke, and then you should be on the compression stroke when neither of these are moving. So if you watch these, so the exhaust stroke is happening right now, and the other thing I'm going to be looking for is down here at the timing indicator. My timing mark should come around on the balancer when I hit top dead zero or top dead center. It should be somewhere near 0 on the timing indicator on the balancer, which will be verifying that that's accurate. Once I have the heads off, I'll be able to actually check where the piston's at in relation to the indicator mark that tells you that you're at top dead center. So, hey, let go. All right, here we go. Let's bring it around. So there's our exhaust stroke right there. You can see that lead rocker's tipping in. Tipping in still. Okay, and now it's closing. Next, we're going to see this one is going to start tipping in once this one's just about closed all the way. There it goes. That one right there, the second one back is tipping in. All right, and now we should be right close to bottom dead center right now with this all the way tipped in. Now, this one's coming up and it's going to be closed here shortly. And I'm just tipping it forward one click at a time on my ratchet because I want to see the mark come around on the balancer. Okay, both those are closed. We should be coming up on the mark on the balancer. There it is. And now it's at 5 degrees. There we go. Balancer set to 0. So if this motor was put together correctly, that's a big if with some of the things I found on here, but if it was put together correctly, the piston should now be at top dead center on number 1 cylinder, balancer set to 0, which also means if I've got my timing set in the right neighborhood, my rotor should be pointed anywhere from right about here in line with the cylinder to a little bit towards the front, depending on where the advance is. So that's what you're looking for when you're setting top dead center, whether it's to take it apart or whether you're trying to put it together. Another thing you can do is you can take something like a zip tie that's straight, and just a zip tie. It's a black one, so you won't be able to see it very well, but you can stick it down in the spark plug hole, and you should be able to feel the piston right at the top of the as soon as it goes in the spark plug hole, it's just bending to the side, which means that piston's right up at the top. So yeah, you should be able to feel that piston right there at the top. It shouldn't feel like an empty hole. So that's it's a pretty simple thing. It's a good place to start when you're doing something like this. Let's go ahead and we'll pull that real quick and we'll take a look. Well, we'll attempt to. That might be difficult to get to the screw. That one's right there. I don't know if the screwdriver's going to reach. Okay, that one's out. Come on. That one's unhooked. That one's unhooked. Ooh, and there's a fourth one back there. It's going to be really hard to get to. So there's not a whole lot of room in these for this oversized or the large cap style distributors. So we might see about switching this out while we have it out for a small cap style. I'm gonna get my hand under there to feel if that hook is in. It's out, okay. Yeah. Basically, the firewall was never relief to have this large cap in here. Okay, I'll just set it to the side because we've got all kinds of wires attached to it still. But let me grab this and I'll show you what all I was talking about. So, as you can see, hold on, let me adjust my camera a little bit so I can get you down in there to see what I'm talking about. Get that out of my way. Get the oil off my hands. One thing GoPros probably don't like much, oil. I think I already got some on the camera. There we go, all better. All right. All right, I'm adjusting the stick so it'll actually reach down in here. Much better. All right, so these are your exhaust and your intake valve or rockers. Your valves are down on the bottom side of the head. Valve stems are up here. These are both closed. I brought it around so at the timing mark on the balancer, right there where my finger is, you might be able to see the groove there, is right on the 0 mark on the indicator. And as I assumed, my timing must have been pretty damn close to where it's supposed to be, because you can see the distributor's pointing right out to number 1, just like it should be. So, and then on the spark plugs, which like I said, I flashed those up. I've got these laying here. Let's see if I can, we'll just do this. That was number 1. Number 3. Number 5. Number 7. So there's a little bit of oil on the threads still. I think was still coming down from the valve cover. But if you actually look at the plugs, these are the same plugs I had in it originally, which somewhere on the screen, I'll put a snap of what at least one of them looked like when I got the car. And then a few videos back, I did a basic tune-up on the carburetor because it was running way rich and not good, and the timing wasn't right. And so I did some tweaks on that and drove it a couple of times. And as you can see, the plugs are burning much more happy. They're not all fouled up like they were before. And then this was number 2, 4, 6, and 8. So again, you can see all those plugs actually look fairly decent. The number 7 and number 8 look like they got a little bit more buildup on them, which is fairly normal just because of the engines sit at a little bit of slope and stuff you get a little bit more oil that runs in the back. So if you've got any valve stem leaks or valve seal leaks or whatnot, or something's weeping into a port, it's not uncommon that the rear cylinders on the motor are where those problems would be noticeable. But really, I mean, this is running pretty healthy, other than it's a complete gutless wonder. So regardless of the fact that it's running healthy, we're going to tear it apart. Something else I noticed when I pulled the valve cover, which is disturbing, is look at that nastiness right there. Let me see if I can scoop it out onto the screwdriver. Yeah, don't know what that is, or that looks like a snail shell. Yeah, I just smushed it down there in the oil. So yeah, there's some weirdness in here that needs to be cleaned out. I'll have to see if I can. Yeah, no clue what that is. I'll have to hit it with some brake clean, see if I can't figure out what that is. We're just going to put it right back where it came from for now. So yeah, that's kind of annoying. And then in other videos, you may recall that we had a mud dauber's nest right up under here that we still haven't taken care of. We'll have to get rid of that today. And I also noticed we had another big old nasty one down there. This must have been a field car for a while, because there's been mud dauber nests all over the place in this car. I've already gotten rid of a whole bunch, and looks like I got a couple more to get rid of. And I probably still have a few more to find. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. I got to get some wiring disconnected on the distributor, and I can get the distributor pulled and get rid of the carburetor, get rid of the intake, and then we'll get rid of the heads, and we'll be halfway done, right? Ha! No, not exactly. But anyway, we'll get back to it. Carburetor's fully unbolted. Everything's disconnected from it, so I can just lift it off there. I'm hoping I don't find what I think I'm probably going to find here, which is an adapter from square bore to spread bore. If you've got a spread bore intake, get a spread bore carburetor. If you've got a square bore intake, get a square bore carburetor. Don't use the adapters. It's just terrible. And I think that's what I have here, because this definitely looks like it's probably a spread bore, definitely a spread bore carburetor, just by looking at the venturis. So let's find out if we have a square bore intake. Oh, look at that. Oh, and it doesn't even have an adapter. Oh no, we're square bore. Oh, and we're dumping fuel. I should have known better. Oh, look at that. I'm pleasantly surprised. This has got square bore to square bore. I don't really care about the fuel that was just dumped, but let's see if I can I turn it this way and not dump fuel? At least not much, so you can see it. So this is, jump a little bit. This is large butterfly, small butterfly, like a spread bore, except it's condensed to fit a square bore. So that's actually a pleasant surprise. I expected this to be a spread bore to square bore adapter. Instead, it's just a straight 1-inch square bore spacer. Let's make sure we're harboring a square bore intake. Oh, see, man, I spoke too soon. It's not what I thought it was, but it's worse. All right, I don't want to destroy that gasket. Give me a second to put the carburetor down somewhere. So, like I said, I just showed you we had a square bore carburetor, right? Pull this gasket off here. Look at that. A spread bore intake. Spread bore intake, square bore carburetor, and they didn't even have the common sense to run the damn adapter. They just ran a straight square bore spacer. People, please don't do this. This is just dumb. The carburetors for a spread bore versus a square bore are the same price. Get the right damn carburetor. If you have the wrong carburetor, sell it or trade it for the right one, because someone else probably has the wrong damn carburetor too and needs the one you have, and you need the one they have. That's extremely frustrating. It also means that my Holly I've got sitting over there is not going to work with this intake. And it means I either need a spread bore carburetor or I need a square bore intake. I believe I have a square bore intake that I can put on here in place of this one, so I'll probably go that route, especially since this is a no-name intake, a generic, probably a China duplicate intake. But this is nonsense. Just make sure if you've got a spread bore, put a spread bore carburetor. If you got a square bore, put a square bore carburetor. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. Last time. Do the right thing. All right, the other thing that I think I'm going to have a little bit of a problem with here is I'm not sure that this distributor is going to come out. So I've got the keeper off of it. The wires are disconnected. Get that one out of my way. That's weird the way that's routed, but whatever. That's over there. That's my thermostat. So we're going to see if we can get this out. Oh, that came right out. Okay, so there is enough room to easily take a late model, large diameter HEI and actually put it in and out as long as the cap's off. So that's not bad. I still probably will go to the small cap because they're just easier to work with up tight against the firewall. So anyway, time to get the intake pulled. Okay, so the intake is off, and well, I can't say I'm surprised. The first thing I noticed, I'll go ahead and switch hands with this, was all the bolts that held the intake on. There's no sealant on any of them, which that doesn't surprise me at all so far. I'm not shocked. Multiple of those bolts should have had some form of sealant on them. My preference would be using this stuff. Really like this sealant. Works well, both water and oil. So yeah, multiple of those bolts should have had sealant on them. So eventually we were going to have a leak problem there, which, surprise, surprise, I think we already did. Or someone before had a problem and didn't put it back together right and reseal it, because these gaskets that are on here, they look fairly new. They don't look like old gaskets. And they, well, looks like a Fel-Pro gasket. They did make the fatal mistake of using the rubbers that came with it, which are split, and there's one of our oil leaks right there, which is fantastic. So we'll be able to fix that. We'll do just straight bead of silicone like you should do on the China wall, both front and back. And if I had to guess, it was probably leaking in that corner right there too, because it looks like there's a gap and the gasket's loose right there. So that's probably one of our other oil leaks down the side. And then the other thing I noticed down in here is we have what looks like a little bit of water that got into this motor at some point in time and started making a little bit of rust right here. So we'll have to clean that out of there. That's not good. You don't want to find that in a motor at all. So we're definitely going to do a good bit of cleaning to try and get all that out of there. It does look to be fairly concentrated to that one spot. Most of the valley looks really good. So hopefully we don't find more of that in anywhere else as we get further into getting the heads off, which, well, we got to unbolt the headers still, and then we'll be able to pull the heads. But yeah, that's not something you want to find in a motor. That's not oil sludge, that's rust sludge. So, well, we'll see what else we can find in here. either way, I mean, I'm just going to clean it, put heads on it, and run it anyway, because it did run decent. So as long as I don't find something like a cracked piston or something crazy, we're going to run it. But, yep. All right. I'm going to get back to work, and we'll follow up when I find the next disaster. Well, we did it. Well, almost. There's still one more key part to do, and that's to actually pull the heads off. All the bolts are out. Everything's cleared out of the way. It was a bit of a fight. There's not a whole lot of room in here. I ended up having to pull the passenger side header out. As you can see, you might even be able to see the starters hanging down there. Had to pull the header completely out. It's over there on the ground. The driver's side header did slide down far enough that it's still technically in the car, but that's only because I'd have to jack the car up to take it out through the bottom. Passenger side, it came out up through the top once the starter was hung down, so that was convenient. I did find something very troublesome in the midst of doing this, which realistically doesn't surprise me with everything else that I've found working on this car. But I don't think the driver's side head was torqued down. I know that these heads weren't originally on this motor. It's not a factory assembly that I'm taking apart for the first time. Someone else has already had this apart. And the reason I know that, let me tweak the stick here. The reason I know that is from looking at these paint layers here. This head was originally orange, never had any blue on it, whereas this block was originally blue. So I know that these two, it's a 99.9% chance that this never came from the factory or didn't come from the factory assembled the way it is. Someone else has had this apart, right? And earlier I pointed out the baby poo, the baby poo in the valley right there. And as I was pulling the head, I noticed we have more baby poo right up in here around that head bolt. And when pulling the head bolts out, this side, I had to take my breaker bar on them, good bit of force, what I expected for head bolts, right? And I came over to this side, and it took maybe half or less of the braking force to get the head bolts to come loose, and they just backed off. I had a lot less effort than I expected. And with the fact that we've got baby poo going on, I don't think that this head was torqued down. There's a chance that it might also have a bad head gasket then, which doesn't matter because I'm tossing them anyways, as long as it didn't actually damage the surface of the head, which it didn't have a misfire. The spark plugs didn't indicate that it was fouling yet, but this was probably a time bomb waiting to go off if we would have actually put it on the road and tried to do any real driving with it. And to take that one step further, the exhaust or the headers, they were all loose. I expected to have to fight those bolts a little bit because, usually header bolts get baked in and they're a pain in the ass to get out. But no, they were all loose. I was able to just put a 7/16 on them because it had proper header bolts in it. So I was able to put a 7/16 wrench on there and just went whoop. And I was like, perfect, they're all loose. So at least I didn't have to fight them. But it is concerning that there might be other stuff deeper in the motor down on the bottom end that didn't get put together right. I'm gonna cross our fingers that the bottom end didn't get messed with because I don't plan on going down into the bottom end. Right now I plan on going back to a running state after doing the head change. But I haven't had these off yet. As you can see, I haven't actually cracked them off there. I figured I'd do that on video, so if there's something exciting, we can find out about it together. The other thing I'll point out before we do that is I've got my head bolts all laid out over here on the ground because, head bolts, they get oily. Why does it do that? You see that weird shadow? That's weird. That's something that the camera's doing. But anyway, the head bolts, not a single one of them shows any trace of having sealant on them. Not on either side of the engine. And if you know anything about small block Chevy head bolts, more often than not, they go into water jackets. They definitely go into water jackets for every single one of them along the outside. All these short ones that run along the outside of the head, those all go into water jackets. Those should all have a sealant on them. And it's a safe bet to put sealant on all of these ones too. There are a few small blocks out there that they may not be drilled all the way into the water jacket, but you might as well assume that all your head bolts are going into water jackets and that you're going to have to put sealant on there. So it was a good thing I decided to at least go this far, because if we would have put this on the road the way it was, if I would have just did the wiring and said, screw it, let's go drive it, it's okay that it's underpowered, we would have ended up on the side of the road somewhere, broke down, blown head gasket, parts falling off the engine. It would have been a disaster. And then we've been calling AAA or somebody else to come tow me home, and the Ford people in my family would, they'd never let me live it down because the Chevy broke down. So we can't have that. We've got to fix it. So we're going to fix it. Now, give me just a second. I'm going to get the camera set up, and we'll crack those heads off there, and hopefully we won't find any real disasters down inside there. All right, that looks about right, at least for the moment. It's kind of far away, but it's the best I can do. Because I can't stick you right up in here, because then you'll be in the way and I'll drop the head on the camera or smash the camera or some craziness. But see if I can not hurt myself trying to get these old iron heads out of here. Unfortunately, I'm putting iron heads back in because that's what I have. Oh yeah, I think I need to get my longer lever. Long levers make more leverage. All right. Let's see, can I go? That doesn't want to budge that way. Oh. Well, not what I was actually going for. I assumed that these gaskets were had some sort of RTV or something that would put on the back of them, stick them to the head, because it's what you typically do. Just a little bit here and there so they stay in place and everything's aligned right. But obviously not. They were still sitting there. But check out how much rust there is underneath the intake manifold gasket. Again, prime indication that water was seeping past the head bolts and past the gaskets, past the intake, and working its way to causing all kinds of problems throughout this entire motor. So we will hope that this problem was identified before any real damage. From what I've seen in the oil that's currently in the car, it's not filled with water. And the coolant that came out of the car that's currently all over the ground again, because when I did the water pump, I made a mess with coolant, cleaned it up. And then going deeper into the motor, pulling the head bolts, which are below the water tank or water pump ports, that dumped much more coolant. But all that coolant's pretty clean. There's no signs of motor oil in that. So hopefully this was old residual moisture that was in there and not a sign of other problems to come. But getting the head off. Oh, here we go. Oh, no. No. Yeah, that side's, it's got some indication too that things weren't tightened up necessarily or sealed up as good as they should have been, but much better than the driver's side was. All right. There we go. Okay, that should be loose. I should be able to lift it off there. I don't know that I can do it from the front because I can't get a hold of the back of the head well enough. So we'll come over to the side. Oh! Oh, there it is. Golly! These are heavy. Whew. All right. Pardon the F. I think I slipped an F-bomb in there. Iron heads, man. Not forgiving. You have to really want it to get these guys out of there. I've got grimy gloves on now, so I'll just set this off to the side. We'll come back and take a look at it. Good news is I really don't see anything too terrible looking at this right now. That would make me think that there's problems rooted deeper in the motor. I think we're going to be okay. We just got to it's got to be sealed up and torqued right when we put it back together with the new heads. But I haven't looked down there in the bores yet. I'll set this guy over here. Whew, okay. Now, the other side. I guess we can. Okay. Lever. See if we can't lever it loose a little bit. That's not going to be good. I don't want to do that on there. Okay, there we go. That did it. More coolant peeing out. I love that. All right, here we go. Head number 2. Heavy son of a bitch. Oh, all right. Oh. Ooh. Okay. Who needs a gym when you got old cars to work on, right? Ooh, that was not friendly. All right. So, another indication that this was not factory. This is not an old head gasket. This is a pretty new head gasket. Felpro, so that's definitely not a factory installed gasket. So, that confirms everything that I had already was 100% sure of, was that those heads in this block were never together from the factory. Someone else put them on there, so someone else took the time to put a really crappy head on this 350. That's disturbing. Hopefully they just didn't know it was a crappy head, I guess. No signs that this, at least on the passenger side, that this head gasket was blown. This one appears to have done what it was supposed to. And the person who put this engine together before me probably would reuse that head gasket. Not me. We're going to be putting new ones on there. There we go. driver's side. This is the head side. That bending is, I did that. It wasn't bent, but there's definitely a little bit of weirdness right here, and right there actually, and right there. This is all consistent with the head bolts not being tightened. That's probably moisture, or that's probably oil coming up through the head bolt up top. And all those, and down here you can see the corrosion, what looks like rust. I don't know if you can actually see it. Looks like a little bit of rust on the fire ring right here. Indication that moisture got in there, which is consistent with the head bolts along the bottom of the head not having been properly torqued down and not sealing. This would explain what I thought was an oil leak coming from the valve cover that I had tightened up. It was probably coming by the head gasket and weeping out between the head and the block. Yeah, this is definitely glad this is something I dug into now instead of deciding to wait on this, because that would have been very bad. We'd been on the side of the road for sure. Let me ditch my gloves, clean my hands off, and I will give you a look at what we've got down in the bores, and we'll take a look at the heads. Okay, I cleaned my hands up enough to grab the camera and not get it all goopy. And I also took some paper towels and soaked up a little bit of coolant that went down in the bores when I pulled the heads, which was inevitable. And now we adjusted the stick a little bit so we can get this down in there. I think we're in good shape as far as the block goes. We look down in here. I'll try not to, let me grab a flashlight. Where did I put the flashlight? There it is. All right. So looking down on the bores, I don't see any indications that we had any real water damage. It looks like maybe some moisture sat on that one for just a little bit while the car sat at some point in time, but it's actually not too bad. It's above where the rings are, and we look pretty good on this side. And the bores look pretty damn good, actually. Well, that one's got a little bit of a roughness to it. But, I mean, all in all, they're not too bad. There's a good bit of carbon on the piston, on the heads of the piston, which that doesn't surprise me with how rich it was running when I got it, that there's some carbon buildup in there. And that's inevitable. You're going to get that no matter what. But overall, that all looks pretty good. We do got some cleanup work to do before we can go start putting anything back together. There's some junk in here that all that needs to go away. Make sure we don't create any problems, especially the little baby poop pile back there. Again, it's fairly concentrated. Looks like it was just barely starting to run back into that galley. So that's, and I don't think we got too much of an issue. We got a little bit of crud right there to get rid of. But overall, it's not too bad. I don't think we've got too much of an issue with the block. My guess is this motor never really got ran much with those heads that were on it, with whoever put this together. I also don't see any indication, which I looked on a board when I first got this car. I stuffed a borescope down in the plug hole, and it looks like this is a virgin bore. These pistons look like stock pistons, OEM stuff. There's no markings on them for oversize. Usually if it's a 10 over or a 30 over or whatever, that's usually stamped right into the top of the piston face right there somewhere. So I think we're good. These look like OEM pistons, which means virgin bore, which means we have a good 010 block. Yeah. Only thing we don't know for certain is that it's a 4-bolt main. Most of the 010 blocks were 4-bolt main, but there are some 2-bolt main versions out there. Until I get into the bottom end, I won't know for certain if it's a 2-bolt or a 4-bolt. And there's no good way to bore scope from the top end down and actually see. I mean, might be able to stuff something down in that drain hole, but I don't know that I'd be able to get the bore scope turned enough to see the main cap. But we may still put it down there just to see if there's any crud anywhere that I can see that warrants actually tearing down further, which I hope not, because if we're going to go any further than where we're at, there's no sense in leaving it in the car. And well, I didn't have any intentions on taking it out of the car. And to be honest, I didn't really have any intentions on coming out as far as I did originally, but then I got the wild hair. You know what? Let's give it a little bit more oomph. I got some heads on the shelf that'll be definitely better than what we have in the car. And well, here's a look at what was in there. And again, there's a good bit of carbon in here. This is the passenger side head, but it looks pretty good. Other than the carbon buildup, I don't see any issues in the chambers. The valves look good. None of them are recessed. Everything's sitting the way it's supposed to. So yeah, I mean, these heads may have even been freshened up before they got put on that motor, which would be even more embarrassing for whoever did it if they put any money into these heads, because they're just not a good flowing head, at least not that I'm aware of. And let me turn this one a little bit so we can look at that one. This is the driver's side, and that looks good. That looks good. Yeah, all the valves look good. The carbon buildup in there looks appropriate. I don't see anything crazy. Looks like there's a little something right there on that valve. That's weird. A little bit of weirdness right there. I don't know if you can see those little edges that my fingernail's catching. But I mean, no signs that there was any damage, real damage done at any point in time. So I think the lack of it being torqued properly and the moisture weeping into places it shouldn't have been was a mitigated problem. I think we caught that before it became a real issue. Another sign that there was crap getting in places it shouldn't have. That's pretty nasty. That's in the cooling. That's a water port, and that's some nastiness. I don't even know what that is or how it got there. But the intake runners look decent. That one looks like it was getting some oil in it. Yeah, that's a little bit of oil right there. That's an indication that they weren't tightened up. Gaskets weren't seated right, fitting well. We look at the runners on this one. Clean water port. That's pretty clean on the intake and exhaust intake port there. That's a little oily or a little carbony right there, which is expected. Yeah, those runners all look good, and we got some more nastiness. So that's the back of the motor. The heads are sitting opposite. The passenger side head, the back of the motor's up. The driver's side head, I set it down with the back of the motor to the back. So again, it's nasty at the back of the motor too, which is just weird. I don't know what that is or why it's nasty like that. We'll make sure we clean out the best we can. And then if I come over here, here's the intake we took off, and those runners are fairly clean. It had a crossover in it, which those always get sooted up. And then those intake runners look clean. That water port looks clean. That's the front. That's the back. The back was dead-headed, so maybe that's why it got yucky back there, whatever nastiness is on there. Yeah. But if we roll that over, and more nastiness at that other end at the back. But the runners overall look decent. I don't see any real problems. nothing that would alarm me that we've got major rework to do. I'm going to need to get something underneath these heads. I've got oil running out of them on my shop floor. It's what a shop floor is for, right? But yeah, so that's what we were after. The goal for today was to get this thing apart, so I know what I was working with. I know I laid out my goodies that I want to put back on there, but I didn't actually expect to get that stuff on the car. It was, wishful thinking that I would get to the point where I'd start putting things back on today, but I don't think that's going to happen. There's a few fights along the way with this that really ate up some time. One of them being getting the header out on the passenger side. Just not a whole lot of room in this stock front end on this car for headers. It was fortunate that header did come out through the top. Otherwise, the only other option would have been to unbolt the motor mount and jack the motor up so that it would lean away from the passenger side of the car and make a little bit more room for dropping the header out. So I was happy with that. I don't know that that's true for all headers on these cars, but if you happen to have or can get your hands on a set of, I can even give you the piece mark on here. This is the header we took off. There we go. That's it's a Hedman headers, U.S. made, and it's a 68168W7 right there. 68168W7 is the model number for the headers on this car, and I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, it looks like it got the original person who installed them did a little custom fitment right there, which it definitely needed it. So, because that was, paper clearance on the fender right there, which is what makes it really tight on the passenger side. But yeah, it wasn't too bad. And then the driver's side, like I said, it was able to, the motors in these cars from the factory on factory V8 mounts actually sit a little bit offset to the passenger side of the car. So you actually have more clearance to the shock tower on the driver's side, which allowed that header to just drop down out of the way, which was perfect. I did have to disconnect the collector from the rest of the exhaust so that they would drop down, but that's 3 bolts, whatever. Yeah. So anyways, that's where we're at. We've got a bunch of cleanup work to do, and it's around 9 o'clock now. So I'm gonna call it a wrap on this part of this video. I'm thinking this is probably going to end up being a 3-part series. The next part we'll do some mock-up fitment. I'll get it cleaned up, and then we'll shoot the next part of the video where I'll mock up, fit the new heads, check the valve train fitment and push rods, and see if something that I have is going to work. If we're going to be able to reuse the push rods that were in here. They all look pretty good. Actually, they look pretty fresh. I think they might have been replaced when this motor was rebuilt. I've got them all laid out right here, and yeah, they've got just a hair bit of a shade mark where they pass through the head. That's the end that was at the rocker. That end down there at my pinky was down on the lifter, but yeah, they look pretty good. I don't see any issues with those, so we're probably going to clean those, reuse them, assuming that they're the right length. We're not going to reuse the stamped rockers that I took out. They're junk. If you're taking something apart this much and you're going to do work on it, at least go over to Comp Cams and get a set of the Comp Cams stamped roller tip style. It's a way more sturdy design than the factory ones. They don't flex, and it is a true 152 ratio. So this will actually give slightly more lift lift than the factory ones, just a pinch, probably not even noticeable as far as how much more lift, but they won't have any of the flex that the factory stamped ones get because they're a much more sturdier design. So we may go with a set of those because I've got those on hand, and they should, in theory, they should work with the stock push rods that I took out of there. The other thing I have on hand is I do have a set of 1/6 ratio crane full rollers. I don't know. I pulled these out just to mess with them. I may or may not try and put these in there. They've got a full set of polylocks. If we do that, we got to get different valve covers because they won't fit under the stock valve covers. But I don't know that this motor really is going to warrant having a full roller rocker on it, or the potential headaches that can come from that if they come apart, or I don't know, we'll see. But they are a 1/6 ratio, which will give us a little bit more out of our cam, which is a very mild cam. So you put a 1/6 ratio on there, you up the ratio, you get a little bit more peak lift, a little bit more overall duration, i.e. it's like doing a mild cam upgrade. Mild, but still a cam upgrade if you go to a 1/6 over a 1/5 ratio. So we'll play with it. If they're a good fit and I don't have to buy more parts to make them work, then we'll look at that route. And before someone says it, something about guide plates or whatnot, the heads that I have that we're going to put on here, let me flip it. Let me set this down because I can't manipulate heads one-handed. I'm just not that strong. There we go. So the heads that I have to put on here are a 186 casting. Oh, goodness. Which also need a coat of paint on them, which means I need the weather to warm back up. I should have painted them last week. But they're fresh as death. They haven't been run since they got rebuilt. Had these done years ago and, well, never ended up using them. But should be a much better flowing head than what we had on the car. The casting number on these is 392-7-186. Would have been, I don't remember exactly what the year code is on these ones, but it would have been, actually, is it right there? Looks like it's a 69 head. I think these might be 69s. But they would have been somewhere 68, 69 time frame. They are what is commonly referred to as a small hump, camel hump head, and that's because, oh goodness, right here, the casting's got the two little humps, kind of like the old school 461, 462 camel hump heads, but those didn't have accessory holes. These were late 60s camel humps, so they've got basically the same intake and exhaust runner design as the early camel humps, except they added accessory holes to them. So it's a really good stock head is what it is. It is not a high performance head, it's just a really good stock head, which is going to be great. And then the reason that guide plates aren't going to be an issue, or self-aligning rockers, you actually don't use them if the head has got this design right here. I don't know how well you can see that. Right there. Let me grab a push rod. Hold on. I'm coming. All right, I got a push rod in my hand. Okay. So, yep, I know I was gone for a long time. So these heads, you can see that the push rod has no side play whatsoever. And since it has no side play, the head is actually already acting as the guide, doing the same thing that a guide plate would do if those holes were enlarged. A lot of your aftermarket heads, those holes are enlarged so that you can run oversized push rods that are stronger. And there's a lot of factory heads that have those oversized because the factory cast, damn you, the factory stamped roller or rocker, they started stamping as self-aligning. which meant it had 2 extra little ridges that would ride on the outsides of the valve tip here, and would keep the rocker aligned. These, as you can see, don't have those ridges. They're smooth all the way across, which means this is not a self-aligning rocker. And the way it was aligned was by that slot being just slightly wider than the push rod itself, which allowed that slot to act as basically a guide plate. And the heads I took off are the same way. They've got that slot, that size and not oversized. So that's why we won't need guide plates with these. That also could be a reason why we won't be able to run the 1:6 ratio rockers. Depending on how much cam lift we have, this slot might not have enough travel length in it to actually allow the push rod to travel the distance it's going to travel, or in the range it's going to travel with the 1:6 ratio rocker on there. We might have to stay with the 1.5, the 1.5 roller tip. The only other thing I'll point out, because I grabbed one of these and saw it, the upgrade with going to the roller tips is these guys. This is the factory pivot right here, and you can tell it's smooth all the way around. The comp cams version of this basically a stamped steel but heavier gauge, which I'll put them side by side. You can see the difference in material gauge. The comp cam is just a much sturdier design, heavier bridge in the middle that keeps everything tight, more material. It's just overall it's a stronger design. And then the comp cam's pivot actually has these grooves cut in 4 places around there, and what that's for is to help oil flow down into the pivot so that you get less restriction down in the bottom of the rocker, and everything stays happier longer without having any issues. So I need a rag. But yeah, so the attempt or the plan going forward will be to put these heads on. We've got to verify that the valve train's all going to be happy, and then once we made sure all that's good, then we need to get a coat of paint on these, and then we can actually put it all back together and run it. But that is not going to happen tonight, and I'm not sure when that coat of paint's going to happen because we need the weather to warm up. Otherwise, I got to figure out a way to warm up a block of cast iron enough so that I can put paint on it. Because without a little bit of heat, the paint won't cure right, and then we'll be up shit creek. Might as well not put paint on it at all. So, and then we're also going to go to a Holley carburetor. I've said that in the past that I wanted to do that. We're going to do that now because I just don't care for the Edelbrock style carburetors. And lucky for me, we've also got to change the intake because I don't want to run a spread bore intake because I don't have a spread bore carburetor anywhere. I do have an RPM, an Edelbrock Performer RPM over here on the shelf. It needs some cleanup, but that's a square bore, dual plane, Edelbrock. So we'll probably clean that up. That's probably going to be the intake we're going to run on this car now, just because that solves my problem. And again, it's something I have on the shelf, so I don't got to go spend any money to put this back together, which is going to be great. That wasn't planned for this car either, but hey, it's what I got. This is what we're working on, so that's what we're going to use. Anyway, like I said, this is probably going to be a 3-part deal. Part 2, we're going to get it all mocked up, make sure everything works, and probably, hopefully, start the process of putting it back together. And then in part 3, we're going to wrap it up, get the motor completely put back together so that all that's left is the wiring, and then we'll be able to actually drive this car after we fix the fuel tank. Forgot about the fuel tank. Anyway, thanks for sticking around. We'll see you on the next one. And in the meantime, if it's cold where you are, stay warm or go out in the shop and work on something. You get warm when you're lifting cast iron heads around or fighting broken stuff or rusted stuff. All right, we'll catch you later.